Welcome to Kingdoms in Conflict. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Wallace. Today, many parents are up in arms about the education of their children. Whether schools are teaching about white privilege or gender identity, is there a place where kids can learn the fundamentals without being indoctrinated? Our guest today is Mr. Will Crossley, president of Piney Woods Boarding School in rural Mississippi. He's here to address these questions and more when we return.
Our country is in a dark, challenging, and anomalous place. As Christians, we are not only called to represent the standard for living life before the holy and just God, but also to live countercultural to the forces of darkness. In its third season, Kingdoms in Conflict addresses these issues from a biblically conservative worldview. Text Kingdoms to 877-425-2104 for free access to our media and resources. Together, let's take back America for the kingdom of God.
Welcome to Kingdoms in Conflict. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Wallace, and we're privileged to have with us today Will Crossley. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. Good morning to you.
It's great to have you on, and we want to talk about you're the president of Piney Woods, one of the largest of only 4 historical Black African-American boarding schools left in the nation. That was founded in 1909, from what I understand. So tell us a little bit about the founding of the school and its mission.
Certainly. So yes, I'm proud to be able to serve as president here at Piney Woods. We are the longest serving African-American boarding school in this nation. It was founded by Lawrence Clifton Jones in 1909. 100 plus years later, we're still here. We're still doing the work for our young people. But that's a kernel of how we began. Here's the real juice of how we began.
Okay. That's what we want, the real juice.
Lawrence Jones had very little money.
Uh-huh.
He had some books that he brought down with him that he was using here in the community. He had his own clothes and a few articles of clothing. He literally had $1.65 in his pocket. $1.65 means something around this campus. He had $1.65 in his pocket, and he had a Bible. And those were the foundation of Piney Woods School. Piney Woods began as a Christian institution in 1909, and we continue to profess our faith in Christianity to everyone who comes our way to this day.
Speaking of faith, you're reminding me that I forgot to ask you about yours. Generally speaking, not everyone who comes on is a Christian, but when I find out they are, I generally ask them to share a little bit of their testimony. So if you could share a little bit of that testimony and then talk about how you got to Piney Woods.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the church. I was originally born on the south side of Chicago. I came to Christ as a young man, singing in the church. I think God convicted my heart to serve other people in His name and for His will. And I've been striving, certainly not always perfect, but striving to make Him the center of my life since that time. I attended undergraduate at University of Chicago and taught school in the city of Chicago, public school. Went on to grad school at Harvard and taught again in Atlanta and some other places. I eventually got involved in government and worked for the governor of Georgia for a period of time. Went on to law school, I clerked for federal judges, and ultimately ended up at a large law firm in Washington. But much of the work that I was doing there it felt very transactional. There's a lot of work on paper. After working in government, which I thought would get me a little bit closer to people, and when I was invited to consider doing this work, I jumped at the opportunity, not only because it would allow me to begin to fulfill what I think God had called me to do, what I think I was born to do, but also because this was my school. When I was 12 years old, I received a scholarship to attend this very place. And coming from the south side of Chicago to rural Mississippi was a huge change and a huge transition. But I think it prepared me for later change and transition throughout life.
Right.
I know that it prepared me for all the other things I was able to do in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And so my goal was to see if we could continue to do this work for others. Lawrence Jones, our founder, taught students what I learned as a student, which I now teach students, that to whom much is given, much is required. And when I had the opportunity to do this, it was not just sort of a privilege for me to be able to do it. In fact, I viewed it and view it as my responsibility to do that. That someone who did not know my name, who had never seen my face, invested in my future. And so all the things that I did were wonderful. But at what point do we, at a certain point, I asked myself, what is it for?
Right.
Ultimately, it's got to be for the advancement of the kingdom.
So Piney Woods is a boarding school. So help us understand boarding schools and what they actually do and what's the actual mission of Piney Woods.
We are. So all of our young people live here on the campus. We actually began as a boarding program. In those days, 1909, we were boarding because people would come here from many miles away. It was in rural Mississippi in the days of Jim Crow. There were not plentiful opportunities for Black folk to get an education. And so people heard about this place and they would find their way here, and they would need to stay. And as people stayed here, we also asked them to be a part of the community. So it wasn't just that you stayed here and got up and learned and then went to sleep again. Everybody here works on the campus and contributes to the community in their own way. Everybody here is learning together as well. And so that was from the very beginning, and it continues to this very day. Our young people today, at the time, we were more of a local kind of state Mississippi program back in 1909. Today, we are far more national, far more international. Our students come from jurisdictions around the country and around the world, from major metropolitan areas, from throughout the rural South to countries of Caribbean and African countries.
How many students do you take a year?
So this year we will serve approximately 240 young people. That is, we will enter another, I think we will enter another 50 or 60 young people in the fall. Our summer programs are actually more active than our academic term programs. Lots of people like to come in for, say, a month. We have 3 summer programs we'll do this year. We'll do a 1-month program. We will do a a 2-week program, and we would do a 1-week program. But actually yesterday, was just considering 10 young people who are applying from Rwanda, who want to come to school here. We had just recently admitted some students from Nigeria, but we have students from Tampa, Florida, to Seattle, Washington, to Los Angeles, to New York, and all points in between. And so it really is an extraordinarily national and international program, an extraordinarily diverse program for that reason. We're predominantly African American, not exclusively. I've graduated a number of white students as well as other races, but predominantly African American. But within that, there's a lot of diversity. The young person that's growing up in the Mississippi Delta, right, is in Clarksdale, Mississippi, right? That young person has a different upbringing, a different growing up experience than the young person that's from Compton, right? That's from Los Angeles, and so bringing those young people together in a space like this creates a powerful learning experience for them, and you start to get to understand how to work with people who are different from you.
Well, I was going to ask you, and you started to touch on that. How was a boarding school? And I know that at least in some of my research, there was close to 100 boarding schools at one point. So I've got a couple of questions with this, and I'm running out of time. But how was your boarding school better for? I mean, what are the advantages? Let me put it that way. What are the advantages of sending your child to a boarding school? Number one, and then number two, what grades do you guys? Where do you start? You started 5th grade, 6th grade. What grade do you start? And then your graduation rate. So if you can get those 3 within the next.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah. See, you get in trouble. I'm passionate about this work. So
yeah.
It doesn't
I can
take
tell,
long
and I'm glad.
But listen, so we start roughly at around age 13 today. Some of our summer programs start earlier. They can start at ages 10 or 11.
But what's 13? What grade level would that be?
That's about 8th grade.
8th grade. Okay.
8th grade. Yes. I am not grade centric, and so we do have grades, but we also recognize that people have been through things in life, and so we try to create opportunities where we're not bound. We're independent school, and we get to do things that other places don't. And so we try to create opportunities. Sometimes you've got a kid who's in the 8th grade, but they're on a 9th grade level. Well, let's see if we can still challenge them, right? If you talk about traditional grades, let's see how we can still challenge them. And so roughly around 8th grade, roughly age 13 is where we begin. That's our primary entry point. We try and bring in kids between ages 13 and 15. And we try to keep them for 3 to 5 years, depending on their particular circumstances. So you asked
your graduation rate.
Yeah, so we graduated 100%. Very, very proud of that. We sent about 96+% of our kids on to post-secondary institutions.
Okay.
We also send some on to military service and we include success is not just a 4-year Ivy League institution, although we send kids to those places, but success for lots of families begins at community college. And for some families, that's the right next step for what they want to do and for how that young person is going to contribute, right, as a responsible citizen in their community. You asked about the advantages, and let me try to answer that question this way if I can. It's really just a question of what do we do, right? Why do we do this work? And fundamentally, our work is about leadership. from the time Lawrence Jones started this work, from the very beginning, it was about next generation leadership. How are we investing in young people in a way that prepares them to be leaders and contributors and responsible citizens in their community, right, in the future? And that's fundamentally what we've done from our very beginning. That's fundamentally what young people will get here. It comes in various forms. At one point in time, there was a lot of work around just exemplifying our various talents. We still believe in talent. We founded here at Piney Woods the nation's first, this was during the days of Jim Crow, okay, during the days of Jim Crow, the nation's first interracial all-girls jazz band that toured nationally and internationally, called the Sweethearts of Rhythm. You can, the Smithsonian has done a whole piece on them. You can look them up. We founded here a baseball franchise that would fuel the Negro Leagues. The Negro League team that was based in Negro League teams based in the Midwest, got students out of Piney Woods. Before other folk were, saying, well, don't make any excuses. Let's buckle down and get up because we're capable of going to the highest heights. We were sending kids to top universities around the country, including, as I mentioned, the Ivy League. And so we've done leadership since our very start. We've graduated people who've gone on to be college presidents and presidential appointees and many, and much more. And so fundamentally, that's what we do. Our work today, a big chunk of our work today is centered around what does next generation leadership mean in an increasingly digital world, right? Such that the technology begins to advance humanity, right? And that's why many of our kids are suffering. They're spending all this time on social media, and folk are talking about the psychological effects and all, because who was in leadership to think about how these technologies are impacting our young people? We're trying to prepare young people for that world, because that is the world that they are inhabiting and will continue to inhabit. They need to be able to lead uniquely in that space where there, unfortunately, is an extraordinary gap of leadership today.
Have you guys done any, or do you do any vocational training?
We do. We have, and we do. So, number one, every student who comes to Piney Woods, I've not had I've been doing this work for about 8 years. I've not had a student yet who has not needed scholarship support. And so every student who comes to our space is entitled to apply for scholarship. And the scholarship is awarded based on family need. If the family, didn't need scholarship, we wouldn't provide it. But so everybody gets a scholarship. Every family also contributes. Within their means, right? And every member of this community works. Every member works, and in that work, it's not just labor, right? For the sake of labor, we're training and developing and tooling young people for things that they might do going forward. So students work in our dining services, right? That's why we've sent students to the Culinary Art Institute of America, because something pricked them as they were working in the kitchen, right? Okay. Students work on our farm. We have a 250-acre demonstration farm. Students work on our farm. They work in the organic gardens. They work with our livestock. I got 70 head of cattle and another 15 head of what we call Piney Woods cattle. It's actually an actual Spanish breed of cattle. Students work on the farm, and we send students to major in agriculture. Do you know agriculture is one of the fields few of us think about, but it's a field that touches all of us. It's where we get our food. It's where we get our clothing.
Absolutely.
and people miss it. The average farmer is age 65.
Yeah.
Right? The average farm in this country is age 65. And so we're exposing kids to agriculture in a different light. We're out there showing kids how you can take technology and you can put robots in the field. And we have a robot called a transplanter, and we have drones. We can show them how you can use drones to survey your farmland. We sit today on 2,000 acres of land in rural Mississippi. We use every piece of that land in order to advance the vocational skills of our young people here on the campus.
Well, look, as you may have heard that beep in the background, we're actually out of time. But I want you to give the website so people will know.
Absolutely. Delighted to do it. www.pineywoods.org. That's PINEYWOODS.org, pineywoods.org. You can give us a call at 601-845-2214. We're always looking for students who might be worthy of a scholarship to be a part of our program. And we're always looking for individuals who might consider investing in our work and in our young people. And you can do both of those things at 601-845-2214 or www.pineywoods.org.
Well, Brother Crossley, we never get a chance to mention the fact that we're both alphas, but and from the south side of Chicago. But I appreciate the work that you're doing. I have a bunch of other questions. We're going to have you back because I wanted to ask you how you survive, Jim Crow South, and a bunch of other questions that we didn't get to. But we'll have you back because education's a big deal for me. It was a big deal for my parents, and I think if there was such a thing, if I agreed in reparations, it would be about helping young people get a good education, if anything. And I think that what you guys are doing is trying to make sure that anybody comes to your school will get that kind of education and then be able to go out there and make a life for themselves. The success sequence that we talk about: finish high school, get a job, get married, then have children. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Those of you who are watching, we'll be back in just a moment.
Rooted in the principles of responsible government, individual liberty and fidelity, strong family values, and economic empowerment, Freedom's Journal Institute strives to advance the kingdom of God through socio-political education and engagement rooted in a biblical worldview. We believe that when Christians, regardless of ethnicity, stand for what we believe in, actively engage in the political process, and prioritize biblical truth, then our country will change. Over the years, we have pledged as an organization to challenge liberal ideology with biblical, sound, conservative principles and values to promote a stable and sustainable family and society. Visit us at freedomsjournalinstitute.org or text KINGDOMS to 877-425-2104 to download our app and receive free access to our media and resources, along with regularly updated news, events, and information as it is available. It is time for us to rise.
Welcome back. In 2021, President Biden proposed the American Families Plan, which, among other things, would increase Pell Grants to virtually make community college free. I criticized the program because it focused on the wrong something. According to the success sequence we discussed in this program and others, people are less likely to fall into poverty if they follow a particular sequence: finish high school, find a job, get married, and then have children. I believe it's like a 90% success rate. In other words, the president's emphasis is on the wrong institution. We must first get our kids through grade school successfully. Money for college means nothing if you can't graduate from high school. Our education system is failing our kids. Unions decided not to return to the classroom even after we knew COVID-19 was not a challenging problem for kids. There were billions of dollars set aside for classrooms to be modified to prevent the spread of COVID, yet many schools didn't open. As a result of the online teaching, parents were now aware of the crap their kids were being taught, from the critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and gender identity garbage. Whatever happened to the reading, writing, and arithmetic? Schools have become indoctrination centers, just like colleges. And places like Piney Woods School are the oasis in the desert of government indoctrinational centers. So are other private and sectarian schools like Urban Prep in Chicago or South Suburban College Prep in the suburbs, churning out students each year with a 100% acceptance rate into college. As I mentioned, college isn't for everyone, and you can make a good living without attending college. That was common until many schools stopped offering vocational training. You see, trade unions realized they could control their trade by eliminating the training in high school and then recruiting graduates to join the union to learn the business. This way, you eliminate any non-union competition. So trade and teachers unions determine what your children learn and don't learn. And I would say it is our fault. The Bible tells us that parents are responsible for the education of our children. Yet we have abdicated that responsibility to others. The father of modern schooling, Horace Mann, said in Lectures and Annual Reports on Education, page 210, quote, "We who are engaged in the sacred cause of education are entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause," end quote. The hostages are our children. Mann believed, like many today, that parents were not capable of selecting the right educational model for their children. Teachers unions fight vociferously to hinder charter schools, private schools, and any school not controlled by them. Thomas Sowell has written a book entitled Charter Schools and Their Enemies. He lays out the argument for more charter schools by studying the success of these schools versus traditional schools. In her new book, Hostages No More, Betsy DeVos argues for educational freedom, allowing the parent to send their child to the school of their choosing and letting the money follow the child. Both books advocate for what I believe the biblical text expects. Ephesians 6:4, quote, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord," end quote. And in Deuteronomy 11, Moses is instructing the nation of Israel concerning God's commands and says, quote, "You shall teach them to your children, talking of them when they are sitting in your house and when they are walking by the way, and when you lie down and when you rise," end quote. And of course, Proverbs 1:7 that says, quote, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction," end quote. The very thing that was cast out of the school system. Let me end with the mission statement of Piney Woods School, quote, "which is to provide excellence in education within a Christian community through the creation of an exceptional academic model which supports the tenet that all students can learn, develop a strong work ethic, and lead extraordinary lives through academic achievement and responsible citizenship, but may not have the opportunity to do so for financial or other reasons," end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, we are Kingdoms in Conflict.